Welcome to Esoteric NYC News, an occult look at the current events. California's burning again. We pray for the people who lost their lives, their homes, and their livelihoods. But the fire isn't just in the forests, it's in our minds, igniting debates, accusations, and questions that cut deeper than the flames themselves. The left points to climate change as the reason for the devastation, with no human culpability. The right fires back, blaming incompetence, bureaucratic red tape, the neglect of essential forest management, and acts of sabotage by illegal aliens. And then there are whispers, conspiracy theories of invisible weapons, directed energy beams, igniting the state in a covert war, directed energy weapons, they call them. Tonight, I'm here with Steve Spear. We're going to pull back the veil to explore the esoteric interpretation of the California wildfires. What hidden forces are at work, and what do the flames reveal about our fractured collective psyche? Esoterically, fire is symbolic of purification and transformation. It is a perfect representation of the transformative power of Pluto in Aquarius. Is Hollywood finished? Will historic Los Angeles be rebuilt into a smart 15-minute city? What do you say, Steve? Let's start with directed energy weapons.
The do weapon conspiracy, what has been going on since Hawaii, right? When the blue roofs, things like that. Actually, one of the conspiracy things in the LA fires now are that the Scientology centers have blue roofs, and people are like, why didn't they get burned down? I think I go along with you, Scott, and that I'm not so interested in the do weapons. I think I've said before, and I say again, gasoline, a gallon of gasoline and a book of matches is a hell of a lot cheaper and probably more effective than do weapons. If do weapons exist, and we know that people have been caught. We know in the Northern California fires a couple of years ago, they caught a bunch of people setting the fires on the side of the roads. And there's video, and now they have the one guy in custody called Juan Manuel Sierra Leyva, and he's been arrested. And so there's filming of these people. People are traveling around LA filming people setting fires. So I don't like using the Occam's razor thing, but that seems what it is. It's like this is guerrilla warfare in some sense, and we would need to talk about what the guerrilla warfare, why, right?
So, I mean, yeah, this is definitely connected to the open borders, and this has long been an issue for the past 4 years that not only has the U.S. government failed to protect the borders, which is its main function, but it's actually aided and abetted like flying military-age men into the United States on taxpayer dollar, giving them phones, putting them in safe houses, which were like these hotels. We're paying for
Right.
it, and they're committing acts of sabotage, it seems. Well, I mean, what we know
Right.
is that every single one person who's been arrested setting a fire has been an illegal alien here
Of military age
of
too
military
is
age. So,
is is
right.
needs to be sort of mentioned for the most part. We know that this Manuel Sierra Leyva is of military age, and we know that that's what's coming across the border mostly. I mean, we know it's not families. We know it's not children. Well, the children disappear. We can talk about that in another time. But the children disappear. We need to ask why. And just in terms of fire, Scott, I always go back to Notre Dame,
Mm.
and when Notre Dame burned down, they insisted it was a candle, right? They insisted it was a candle. And, they insisted this time around that it was the winds until they started finding people and arresting people. And now people are starting to uh, accept the fact. Again, it's the media presenting a narrative, people following it, and why? Why is the big question? $750,000 to this woman who was supposedly the one to make sure there was water in LA. I didn't even know that was like a position, but she wasn't. None of it served the people, and now we have a burned down city. One of the major. We need to talk about why it happened in this entertainment capital too. I think that's important. And Mel
You
Gibson,
something. Yeah, you mentioned something important. I mean, the reservoir was dry. Okay.
the reservoir was dry. There's
We knew
video
there
of
was
it.
a problem. And then the mayor went to Ghana. But the question is, why was the reservoir dry, and also the firefighters, the hydrants were dry. So how could this happen in a first class city, highest taxes in the world,
Right, right.
and it's like a third or fourth world fire department, you know?
And I've heard that people were stopped from taking the ocean water, right? People were scooping the water with planes, and they were
Right.
told not to do that. We also need to actually, very interesting, Scott. Wow. Uh, do you know about this smelt, the fish?
Yeah, the fish, right. That's why they divert a lot of the water,
Well,
right?
I believe that the smelt fish is kind of a lizard more than a fish. I think it's a kind of a it's a land crawling fish. I should really look it up because that would make I wrote some notes down, but I'm going on the fly now because if that's the I'm going to look it up, Scott, because if it is a crawling fish, you know what that implies? It's it doesn't say that, but I'm going to go with it anyway. It's a salamander.
Right. That's I've heard that, right.
And if it's a salamander, what is that, Scott? It's the
Electric.
elemental of fire.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Salad.
so
Yep.
I'm gonna go even if this smelt fish. I think it's some kind of mud crawling fish too. I believe I should look into it more. I was just looking on my phone, but I'm not going to do that right now. But so that's kind of becomes the occulty kind of aspect to it. Like I'm always looking for like that kind of I think Coleman calls it the Twilight language, right? Is if familiar with that, right? So
Right.
like this the fish and things like that. I mean, that's one way to look at this in an esoteric way. There's also the sort of more magical way, and then there's the parapolitics, right? The politics that don't get discussed, or the really hidden politics behind everything. And we know, I say, there's a million curtains, keep pulling them down, a million valves. And we can view those all these theories, all these conspiracy theories or theories as these vowels. But where is this final vowel and what lays behind it? And that's the big question for a lot of people in the occult community, in the conspiracy community. And sometimes we get lost in these sort of rabbit holes. Oh, look, let's go down this rabbit hole. Right? What I mean? I don't see the purpose to that. I like to look at things holistically, and then maybe when I get enough data points around the issue, I can actually maybe make a little bit more of a judgment on what I think it is. But it's again, that would only be theory. One of the things that really struck me, well, while you were speaking before, the idea of the potlatch came up. The Bataille potlatch, the idea that there was, on occasion, a society needs to kind of rid itself of things, right? And I'm gonna read what Mel Gibson said about his thing. He said that Gibson described this feeling of a strange mixture of sadness and almost kind of elation. Claims he counts as blessings after witnessing the horrors of last week's events. He said the house and possessions they were lost in the blaze were just things that may or not be replaceable, but they're only things. Appearing relieved, he continued, "We're still here, and I just kind of look at it almost in a weird kind of way as purification." Right? So, a potlatch is a purification. Society has been so heavily weighed down with objects and also imagery. And I would say that Hollywood is possibly the manufacturer of images, right? It's the reality studio, right? Like Burroughs said, storm the reality studio. So has the reality studio hit its limits? I believe, it feels that way. It feels like the manufactured reality studio has hit its limits. And what does that mean? You know, Go ahead, Scott. You have anything?
No, I mean I agree with you. I think Hollywood, I mean people aren't especially with AI right now, Hollywood's in trouble. A lot of people aren't going to the movies
True.
and right? And a lot of the
True.
films now being done. Uh, they even talk about moving Hollywood away from California anyway.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, that's a very good point, Scott, because they've been remember what Francis Ford Coppola said in like the 80s about Hollywood. He said it was the Enron of entertainment.
right.
The bookkeeping is bad. The bookkeeping is bad. I was under the impression when COVID happened and they had to shut down all the studios, they had too much product. They had too much product to sell. Does anybody really believe that a million people are watching, name some Squid Games, and we know, I mean, I don't know what to name.
Which is
Lord of the
actually
Rings.
Korean, and that's a good point because Squid Games is like an international hit now. So other countries now are producing more popular films and TV shows now than Hollywood. So Hollywood's
Right.
in trouble. Their
Right.
brand
So
is in
so right.
trouble.
So
Yeah.
Hollywood is, the center has been lost there. Uh During COVID, I believe during COVID, they were very happy to shut down because it gave them a chance not to produce product. And they had 2 years where they could sit there and say, oh, it's not that we don't want to produce product, but we can't. But the truth is, they didn't want to produce product because the budgets were gone. The money is gone. There is like, how do these things sustain themselves, Scott? I don't understand how the production budgets for everything that's on Amazon and Netflix and name it. Where is the production budget for this when there really is no uh, profit to be made. I mean, I don't know if you do the books, I can't see how it would work out. It's kind of like the government, right? And then there's all the grift going on. How do they pay? So it's very interesting that this time it's Hollywood, like you say, and it's the reality studio that's being taken down. We do know that there were fires in Northern California last year, 2 years ago, where they found people setting the fires too.
Right.
One of the things that I was thinking about too is Hollywood, right?
Mm.
People always think about the name, and I always ask rhetorical questions, sort of. But what is Holly most known for in the magical circles? It's
The, the,
it's
the
the
king. Go
the
ahead.
best wand. It sort of makes the best wand.
Mm.
And what is the wand? Fire,
Mm. That's right.
right? The wand's a fire, right? So, we can going that's an esoteric look at it, But uh while I was watching last week and this stuff happening, uh my big kind of like wow was the fires happened right where they filmed the end of Planet of the Apes.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, in Malibu,
Wow.
and I could
Wow.
swear, Scott, as I was watching this footage, that cliff was there, the cliff.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and so that was, if you look up, that was filmed right there in Malibu.
Wow.
And that leads me into the dystopian angle, right? Like, how much dystopia can we handle? When the reality studio collapses, you know, we're left with a dystopia. We're left with like this hollow imagery that, what is the psychological damage to people? I mean, when all their imagery, all their investments all their psychic investments in Beyonce or the Kardashians or any of this is smashed. I mean, what happens to the psychic void that they must experience, this consumer culture kind of being rejigged? It's part of the psychosis that's going on. Maybe the cognitive dissonance. Let's talk about, some people in the conspiracy world are saying that the reason there's these fires is because it burns the evidence of P. Diddy and this kind of thing. You know what I mean? This Hollywood, that these Hollywood mansions, they burned down. There's always talk of tunnels underneath all these things, right? All the time. We always have the idea that there's these tunnels and this kind of secret substructure that the conspiracy people, the the guilty parties use to you know uh what does
Yeah.
that mean? Good,
It-
Scott.
no, it's true. And I mean, in a way, this is almost like I don't know why they start in the rich area, but it's almost like urban renewal in a way, because now we're talking about uh, the Olympics are coming there, and also now they're talking about the 2028 smart cities strategy,
Right,
which it's
right,
pretty impressive. I mean, metro rail expansion, electric vehicle infrastructure,
right,
autonomous vehicles.
right.
Uh, yeah, so I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of in the people in the conspiracy theory saying, this was
Well, sure, Scott. I mean, Scott, and I find that undeniable. I mean, we know that's happening. Look what's happening in New York City over the last few weeks. We have congestion pricing. What is that for? That's to make sure that you don't go 15 minutes away. You know what I
right,
mean? Like it's one boundary. It's creating all these boundaries. COVID was very good at that too, right? You
right,
didn't kind of venture outside. You got very acclimated to being at home. You know,
right.
so the 15-minute city thing is real. I mean, that's the kind of, but the question again is why? Why do they want to uh possibly because it's easier to control smaller populations than a larger one, but I say it's all about control
Mhm.
and but why? Is it to psychologically beat people down? The psychological aspect of this cannot be, pushed aside. Think of the trauma. My friend Lisa lives in LA, and during COVID, she watched the cars outside her house just doing, 360s, and the kind of lawlessness and the people literally standing there going, "What's going on to society?" And
Right.
now you have, just this huge conflagration. And what does, psychically, what does that mean? And if there's a psychological element to it, we could say that in some regards there's a magical element to it too. But it's pretty interesting. Also, there's that old spiritual term, uh, what God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no water, but the fire this time, right?
Right.
The earth was going to get purified by fire this time, and of course, we've had floods. We had floods in North Carolina. We have floods all the time. But I think the fact that, like I say, the reality studio has burned down this time, what does that mean? And again, it's like a potlatch.
Mm.
It's taking away the substance of the consumer culture. And already they're saying, oh, we can't release this preview of the new Marvel movie because of the fires. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, it's like this is the same under COVID. They couldn't do things. But is it purposeful? Because remember, behind it all, there's bookkeepers, right? And
Yeah.
the bookkeepers say, we don't have the money to do that. And rather than admit that what they're doing is a falsity, they they concoct a plan, and maybe they even just use the circumstances as Hillary famously said, never let a go to waste. Was it never let a catastrophe
Oh,
go to
right.
waste?
Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, never let it go to waste. Utilize it towards the goal there. It's very, very interesting. And what do you think, Scott?
Well, I find it interesting that I mean, in this past year now, a Wildflower Studios, Robert De Niro's $1 billion um, facility. It's a new studio in Astoria, Borden Studios, East End Studios in Sunnyside. I mean, these are all brand new
Right.
Steiner Studios expansion. These are $1 billion
Yeah.
studios that are
Yeah.
being built in New York. I just find
Yeah.
that interesting. It's almost like they okay, everything's moving now out of Hollywood. I think De Niro's it's 11 sound stages in 2 levels. So that's
Right.
open. Well, it's opening imminently. And
Right.
Gordon Studios is another multi-million-dollar studio in Queens. And now they're building another one in Sunnyside, and that's a multi-million-dollar facility. And these,
Right. Right.
I
But
mean,
but
so
but
all these are coming. It seems like all these. So in other words, Hollywood disappears. They're still going to be making movies. So
right. Well, remember that the Black Mariah studio, the first studio, was in Edison, New Jersey, right? That's
right,
the That
right,
was Edison's studio, the Black Mariah. And
right,
then Long Island, Amityville, I believe, places like that were Hollywood for a while.
And
Uh,
Bayside, Queens. I mean, that's where a lot of the Hollywood people live. Bayside
right,
was going to be the
right,
Hollywood Hills
right.
of New
And
York.
of course the Great Gatsby, which happened in what, like it didn't happen that far out on the island. It wasn't out in the Hamptons. It was closer. It was in
Right.
closer to NASA. So so again, is that like a cyclical thing too? That it's it moved from the East Coast to the West Coast to the East Coast. One of the things I always say is that people disregard churn. Some economists said without churn, nothing happens. If the money is sitting there safely,
Right.
let's say people earn money, it sits there safely. There's nothing for the oligarchs to make money on. There's no churn. You need to put the money in the system, churn it around, then it becomes very easy to pick it off. These billion-dollar studios, Scott, who's like, what product are they? Well, we have to remember there's commercials, right? So they do commercial photography, they do movies, they do TV shows, but how sustainable is it? You know what I mean? It seems to me fully unsustainable. Then they need people to consume that product, right? So then it's COVID. Stay home and watch Netflix.
Right.
Crime is bad. Don't go out. Don't leave your house. Crime is bad. You can't
Yeah.
take the subways that bad. You don't want to go now because you have congestion price. So stay home and consume product, right? And the product is this constant bombardment of a false reality. It's like an augmented reality. And psychologically, what is that doing to people? Even what we're doing here now, we're having this conversation. This is all new, right? 100 years ago, this wasn't around. 50 years ago, it wasn't around. 20 years ago, it was barely around. And now we're in this new era of just bombardment of imageries. Like I've said before, I'm very interested in Yeats's Hodos Chameleontitis, which is where he talks about just this barrage of imagery and how do you find a pathway through it that kind of makes sense or has some validity to it, where you're not lost in this maze of influence. You know what I mean? And it creates a psychosis. And because there's we can go back to Artaud, who said there is no firmament, right? There is no firmament. We can go back to the dissembling of the senses, right? If I was optimistic, I go to the super spectrum. And I say what we're developing now is this extended sensorium, where we have the ability to possibly, this is in the most optimistic sense. We have the ability to absorb these things almost intuitively, not it becomes this kind of uh, eighth tower that Keel spoke about. Uh, the eighth tower. And then I'm going to get a little out there. Is it just about electromagnetism? Is it just about me staring in the screen and getting bombarded by electromagnetism and being in a world where everything is emitting something? And what does that mean? What does that mean outside of the physical, beyond the physical? What does that mean? That's a big question for me. You got anything,
Yeah.
Scott?
Well, I think in a less esoteric point of view, I think you're going to see a political sea change in California because a lot of the progressives who supported these progressive governments are realizing that holy shit, they can't protect us. They can't stop a fire, right? And they're hiring people that have no expertise. They're hiring people on the basis of, for
DEI,
yeah, I mean, on who they are, and
that
that
DEI hires, right? The DEI
right,
hires.
that
And
famous video where the firefighter says, well, people want to be saved by people that look like them.
right,
Right? And then but
right.
she said, the guy says, can you carry a man out of a building?
Right.
That's the thing. Like,
And she says, like, why was he
yeah,
there in the first place? Like,
right,
basically,
exactly.
basically abdicating her job. Her job isn't to
So
do the job anymore. It's to
right.
kind of posture or something. And yeah, we're really down a rabbit hole of,
So
I I go back to what's his name? Gramsci, right? Who was talking about like destroying the common sense of the people. I
Right.
mean, that, you can't control people if they have common sense. Get rid of that common sense.
Mhm.
Engineer it so that common sense is gone. Well, they've done a damn good job, right? Because there's no common sense anymore. Uh, I do want to bring up the family and the Virgin Mary statue. Did you see that, Scott?
Oh, no, I did not see that.
So there was a family, they had a house, it burned down, but there was a Virgin Mary statue that didn't burn.
Oh, really?
And
Interesting.
there was this now, I mean, you know, miracles, I don't, does that qualify as a miracle to me? No, but they were and then the whole family came and they were very religious. They were singing like hymns that they
Mhm.
had done in the past to this Mary statue. And they're standing there in the ashes singing this hymn to this Mary statue, which, has some interesting, we were just talking about Mel Gibson, right?
Yeah,
Where, another, famous Catholic, right? And, you know, uh, is there, with a kind of potlatch like that, when everything gets destroyed, what do you have left? I
right.
think the answer might be faith, right?
Mhm.
And when we're talking about esoteric things, the core of esotericism is probably some faith in a belief of something beyond the mundane, right?
Right.
You know, again, the center cannot hold here. There's too much shit in the world. What I mean?
Right.
We have too many objects, we have too much imagery. Things cannot, in my opinion, sustain. Maybe it causes a mutation. I'm not against a mutation of the senses going beyond the what's been known. This kind of broadening of the electromagnetic spectrum, maybe, and maybe even something else. But uh I don't know. Of course, the Phoenix we can go into, right? It's
Mhm.
rebirth from fire. A lot of the political thing, a lot of what's gone on is what's called creative destruction, right? Destroy the system and have it be rebuilt. What a, but my question is like, what are we rebuilding it to, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that we were talking about dystopias, there was this utopian impulse that I think has been instilled in people, in the left especially. And that utopian impulse is pretty platonic. I think it's like this idea that there is this absolute form out there that we're striving for. And I've kind of progressively become less inclined to appreciate that. I think this idealism and that's a word that the left would be associated with. This idealism is a falsity. What I
Mhm.
mean? It's like, and I go back to the media engine of the 50s and 60s, Life magazine, Time magazine, presenting this, we were promised jetpacks, utopianism, and that
Yeah.
life isn't good enough unless we're progressing towards this ideal. And, to get to that ideal, we need they would need some creative destruction. I mean, all these 15-minute cities are presented as utopias, right? They're presented as utopias. This is the
Well, what do you
perfect.
think the reason for a 50-minute city is? I mean, what's the purpose of it?
Well, I think one of the, like I just said, the idea that you can have this utopia, but really, I think the upper echelons, whoever they might be, I have no idea really. Uh, it's about control. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And now that we have this digital ability, of course, Metatron, I might have mentioned I used to hang out with the Ansar community in Bushwick,
Hmm.
and they had this. I still have that pamphlet where they talk about the beast computer, and this was in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
And how the beast computer was like the recording angel, right? It's recording everything. It doesn't need to act on it at the moment, but it has records of what you do. So I think a 15-minute city, everything gets recorded. The 15-minute city in New York, from or the smart buildings. From what I've hear, the most advanced ones are in Industry City in Brooklyn.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. You cannot, now this is just sort of hearsay, but I know people who've worked there and they've told me things. It's like you get your biometric card,
Hmm.
the doors will not, every door is digital. You
Okay.
can't you can't open a door without your digital ID. That all that digital ID is a central control station. And that central control station can say, you know what? Your digital ID didn't work, or you owe some money. And not only do they lock you out, but they can lock you in, right? They can, if let's say you're a manufacturer or a cook or something, you have product in there, you walk up one day and you say, oh, why isn't my card working? Because you owe us some money, right? And
Right.
so the digital thing has really shaken out to be control, right? It's all about control. It's controlling people's money through Zelle and, it just turned out that, which bank was it? I believe it's Capital One. They've ripped people off for $2 billion in interest.
Jesus. Wow.
So, as the banking goes, as the money goes there, and Scott, going back to the Hollywood thing and the Enron of entertainment, you know what I
Right.
mean? They need to cook the books to make it seem feasible.
Right.
Why do they need to continually put out this product? Is it a vanity thing for movie stars? If you know people who work in the film industry, there is this kind of glamorous gloss. They all get tortured. They don't get paid. They work like 20-hour days, but they're like, I'm in a movie or I help with a movie. It's an odd psychological thing. When I taught computer animation, the kids said, I said, "What do you want to do?" And they said, "We want to do movies." And I said, "You don't want to do movies. You'll end up locked in a room, and
Right.
it's not
Right.
creative."
Not
But
very
they were like,
glamorous.
I want to see my name on screen so bad." It's like, dude, it's your name on a screen.
Right.
But 3 years later, I'm at a SIGGRAPH, and the guy walks up to me and goes, "Hey, Steve." And I say, "Hey, how you doing?" He goes, "You taught me, remember?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." And I said, "How you doing?" He goes, "You told me not to work on a movie." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I worked on Bug's Life." He said it was the most horrible experience. He said they just like you said, they locked me in a room. I was just a cog, and I don't ever want to go near it again. So,
Wow.
but what is like again, what is Hollywood about? You know what I mean? Like what it's the image factory, it's the reality studio. And when do we have so much imagery that we can't process it anymore? We're
Mhm.
way beyond that point. And then
Yeah.
and then just like people who are watching the TV in a very, I don't know how to put it, but if they're just like hypnotized way, right? Where they're just like hypnotized by it. They have no subjectivity to it, or maybe
Right.
objectivity to it. They're just looking, they're self-identifying with the TV. They're self-identifying with these movies. you know, what happens when that gets stripped away? And it's getting stripped away. We can feel it. Trump is a big part of that. People have been like, you know what? We were sold an illusion. But then we can go back and a little recursive. Trump's an illusion to some degree.
Right.
He's a media master, right?
Right.
He is maybe the epitome of it in some regards. And I'm a Trumper, but he is the epitome of it, the epitome of a brand. Even the name is pretty great. So, but there's not enough money. If people are sitting home not working, where does this money get generated? Where does the product get generated? And that's why I go back to, I think this potlatch, it's a reset. I'll say that, the oligarchs were talking about Schwab and the transhumanists were talking about a great reset. And I think that great reset might be the other way around. I'm actually reading, which is horrible, the Butlerian Jihad,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Okay.
Which is the Frank Herbert's son writes this book about what was mentioned in Dune about, the no more computational devices. They have to be destroyed because they've taken people's identities. So they go through a Butlerian Jihad where they destroy these machines and they reclaim their humanity, right? They reclaim their humanity. What's more esoteric than reclaiming your humanity and reclaiming your soul, really? And And, maybe this is a natural progression towards people seeing their souls, seeing their identities in jeopardy, and deciding they need to or there's no backing out, go through it, go through the fire, right? Go through the fire, right? So, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, interesting. In the rebuilding, I mean, a lot of people did not have insurance. Their insurance was canceled the month before because I think experts saw that this was going to be another big fire season, and they probably saw the fact that the reservoir is
The
empty.
bookkeepers, Scott, the
Right,
bookkeepers at the
right,
insurance companies, the
and
bookkeepers at the insurance companies said, you know what, we can't afford this.
right.
Let's start canceling. I mean, I tell
So,
people there's big, you know, I knew a deputy mayor of New York City, right? And he was Giuliani's deputy mayor. And he told me once, he said, Steve, this is in when Giuliani was in, so it's 20 years ago. He said, you can't believe the algorithm. He didn't use the term algorithms because that wasn't really a popular term. But you could it's cybernetics. You could trace a pathway of the most likely outcome. You could change a few factors and the outcome and model these outcomes. So you're modeling these outcomes. The insurance people are modeling these outcomes. We have X amount of blah blah blah. We have X amount of money. We're paying ourselves this much money. I want to make more money as the insurance broker. What do I do? And the we see it in government, the fiscal responsibility, the judicial, what's the word? The fiduciary responsibility. Because you brought it up before, there's no accountability in government anymore, zero. They the books are so cooked. And where's the money go? We can give 500 billion dollars. What did we give 500 million to Ukraine yesterday? I think
yeah, billing.
Biden's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So,
And we're giving $770 to the people in Los
right.
Angeles.
Yeah.
That's that, so
We're
they're
building we're
obvious,
paying for the pensions of Ukrainian government workers.
right? And
Un,
and and if you haven't heard, Scott, there were
Unbelievable.
eight mansions. Ukrainian
Right,
Ukrainian generals had
right.
eight mansions in Los Angeles that got burned down, right?
Highest
And
taxes in the world, and we're being giving it to fucking foreign countries for their
the what?
pension.
Say, say again?
I can't even live off my pension.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Jesus.
so Scott, that's like again, that's like the cognitive dissonance. When you just expressed that concern, in
Right.
your face was this cognitive, this idea of just like, what is
What
going
the
on here?
right.
What is going on
They
here?
can't,
Like,
yeah. Anyway, in North Carolina, that's another issue for another program. But I mean, I met some people recently in Virginia from North Carolina. Actually, I was at the Nation's Gun Show, and they were saying, the press isn't showing this place is a disaster zone still. Where's FEMA? Where,
right.
people living in
Well,
tents.
FEMA, let's talk about FEMA, Scott.
Right. So where is FEMA in this fire
Let's
situation?
let's let's talk about FEMA
Right,
and let's talk about the Red Cross, Scott.
right.
Let's talk about the Red Cross and all the money they get. And they fed on people like, oh, we're helping people, we're doing blood drives. The Red Cross money, first of all, I believe it's 70% of the blood that they get, they
Mm,
use in medical development. It's not going to a crash victim or it's not going to any of that. It goes 70% of it goes to the uh, medical industrial complex, right?
right.
Uh, is that a bad thing? I don't know. I have to admit, as much as like I might want to uh, accuse these things, mortality is up, right? Mortality is up. People's life span is longer. The question is it a quality lifespan? You know what I mean? Is it just to stare in front of a TV? And why? Why do they want is it a matrix where humans are batteries? You know what I mean? It is just some psychic energy we're expelling that they harvest. If we wanted to go to Red Cross and go down the conspiracy hole, watch the blood thing, Scott. Say the magic words, adrenochrome, right? Talk about a conspiracy theory. You know what I mean? Like, one of the things that I've been studying a lot or thinking about in occult or esoteric terms, esoteric is probably the best, is hormones, pheromones, and how they affect people. and I've spoken about this before, and you probably heard me say it about in this idea that as a machine, they know how to prompt certain uh, responses. And look at even at the entertainment industry. Is it to entertain people anymore? It's the manipulation industry, right? I mean, that's really what it's about. It's not about entertainment. And I always ask myself, is there a subcarrier? Is there a subcarrier going on behind all the entertainment? And how would that work? And why would that work? And what would be? But is there some sort of encoded message, carrier frequency going on in all this electronic stuff? And we need to talk about why, I mean, and I don't know, but it does seem that way. Uh, I could mention that transistors, when they were invented and how they were invented or how they were discovered. I think you might know a little bit about that. It's, sometimes they say it's from a UFO, right? Okay. It's, what does that mean? How much are we being manipulated? How much of our own lives do we really own? How much of our own lives do we really own when we are pressured at every point by everything? And Hollywood has been a huge part of that manipulation, right? Has that time come due? You know what I mean? Has it come due? Are the fires actually just like God smoting them?
Right. Well,
Maybe because
yeah.
because they're guilty of a lot of crimes. They're guilty of, I say to people, keep your fingers off my mind, right? Keep your fingers off my mind. All right. And they've been going around digging into people's heads for a long time now. You need a new car. You need this. You're not good enough looking. Here's your pharmaceuticals to make you feel better. What the hell? Right? So is this, we talk about this being biblical, like the things that have gone on have in the last few years, do they feel really biblical? Just really quick, want to bring up another one thing. I looked into this guy's name, Juan Manuel Sierra Leva, and Sierra means soar, or it's kind of like a aggressive soar, I believe. Sort and Leva, Levant, the Levant, things like that. Leva kind of resonates or is an etymology of the landscape.
Oh,
So
right.
we
Well, mhm.
so we have, I just did a quick look. I don't mind going down that rabbit hole really quickly. I mean, I'm not spending my life, but I just said, what's this guy's name mean? I think, but Sierra Nevada means sort of a sordid landscape or, a destructed landscape. Uh, he was arrested in the Woodland Hills too, which is kind of interesting.
Huh,
It's
right.
just and, you know, are they, I was hanging out with the kid the other day and he turns to me and he goes, "Have you ever heard of the revelation of the method?" And I said, "Yes, I've heard of the revelation." And he was like, "That's what's happening now." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude. You know what I mean? Like, is that what's happening now?" And you're familiar with the revelation of the
No,
method,
actually,
right?
no. No, what is that? No. Mhm.
So the revelation of the method, I think that guy Woodward, who wrote like King Kill 33, if you're
Mm.
familiar with that.
Yeah, I
I
did see that in Apocalypse Culture. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he
Kill
coined the
King
term, but
33.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think he coined the term, but uh, revelation of the method is the idea that it's a little hard to that when the game is over, they need to reveal their tricks when there's no backing out of it. You know what I mean? Like when they've won and it's going down a hole as some sort of, and the kid said to me, it was like a karma thing. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it is, but it's like part of the ritual is to say, okay, this is what we've been doing, and now we have to reveal it. So, revelation of the method, it's also possibly like a humiliation ritual. You know what I mean? They've humiliated us psychically, and they've humiliated us, and who they are, I don't know. Have we done it to ourselves? We might be they, Scott, for all we know.
Right.
But we've humiliated ourselves so much that or they've humiliated so much that the final humiliation is to point that out and reveal it to you and say, this is what we've done to you. That's the final degradation, right? And I go back, Scott, too. You might know, I think it's God, who's the Roman Sufi Evola.
Oh, Julie Savile. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Evola was very hot on this Muslim sect, the Mali Mati. I'm not going to get the name. I wish I could. Which was about self-humiliation, right?
Mhm.
The idea that, rather than this, Hollywood is the height of arrogance, right? The
Mhm.
height of arrogance, rather than the going for that self-aggrandizement, that, self-humiliation is the spiritual path, right? You
Mhm.
know, uh, that I just find that very interesting because I think that's a counter to
Mhm.
the consumer society we live in. I also think that, the potlatch, the
Mhm.
Bataille talking about the accursed share. I guess the accursed share would be something that somebody who knows Bataille better than I would talk about. The fact of just over production
Yeah.
and, and what does that mean? Economically, socially, and also psychologically. What do you think,
Yeah, I
Scott?
think yeah, I think yeah, you're right about that. And I think one other element too, and just to sort of end things on this note is I don't know if you saw Adam Carolla's rant on California, the fires, when he was talking about how hard it was before the fires to
To
get
get a
a
job.
to get a job. That was one thing. Yeah, that was his whole idea when he wanted to become a firefighter, and he had to wait 7 years because he said he was the wrong ethnicity or color.
Well,
And
because the DEI hires, right? There
right,
was a
and then
big,
the woman next to him, so he waited 7 years to take the test, and then the woman next to him, she was African American. He said, "How long have you? When did you get on a list?" She said, "Last week."
right,
Right.
right.
So,
Yeah, I
so,
mean, and there's
but
some,
his whole thing was like on building how the current I don't know Leviathan they call it who coined that term that was
Hobbs,
well, no, actually, there was another book, Leviathan and His Enemies by James Burnham, how the bureaucracy is just absolutely killing us. They've created this bureaucracy and it's
right,
just efficient. So the bureaucracy in California has made it almost impossible to build anything, right? So he was saying even
right.
before, and maybe that's part of the reason Hollywood's leaving because I mean they've made it so
But
hard to do
Scott,
anything.
they're gonna come to New York. It's worse. It's just as bad in New
Yeah,
York.
that's
I talked to my lawyer and he was like, Steve, nothing gets done anymore because
yeah,
it's just,
and
and
that's
we were
Leviathan,
this
right?
right. Well, this was supposed to be actually, and it's also the octopus, Scott, right?
Right.
That book, right? Octopus,
Oh, right, right,
which got the guy killed, right?
right.
Because he was exposing the fact that these things are multi-tentacled. We seem to go down rabbit holes. It's this, it's like
Right.
but it's, we're dealing with because computers have allowed it really to be networked together in a very efficient, faster way, which used to take a lot more time. Now, why? How did we end up in this cybernetic madhouse of
And I hate to say it. I mean, I just got back from Japan. It's a world, well-run, civilized country, spotless trains, service is phenomenal, quality of life is phenomenal, taxes are low, right? People, frankly, and the quality of life is great. And then you come back to here where nothing really works anymore. I flew
right,
into Newark and it was chaos. No one knew
right,
anything. I went to the
right,
information desk and the guy was on his phone and they very surly looked up and I said, where's the bus to Manhattan? I don't know.
right,
I said, "What's your
right,
job today?" He said, "Well, my first day." It's like no one gives a shit, and
right,
then you go in and no one speaks English.
right,
We,
right.
we, we've turned ourselves into a third world, like Egypt
Yeah,
in the bad days. In other words,
yeah,
they couldn't fight fires. Now we can't fight fires, and
yeah.
things don't work. No one knows anything. Anyway,
No one wants to know anything, and like you say,
right,
Scott, that's staring at their phone. You know what I mean?
right,
Like to do what? To do what? Like what? I can't figure out what people do. You know what I mean? I don't understand like where it's come to this. I also just before we leave, I just want to talk about just really quick, the Estimated Prophet song by the Grateful Dead, where he talks about the fire on the burning shore, California. Bob, we had changed the lyrics sometimes from like what was the one? He changed it to this afternoon streets turned gray and I watched the cars below. So that was an alternate line to one of the lines in the song. Is there, uh, has this been prophesized? You know what I mean? Is this, the cyclical thing? I mean, you mentioned it. Is this cycle? And then we know that it's not, well, they say history doesn't repeat, it rhymes, right? And also the idea of the helix, which is kind of an esoteric term. It's not circular repeating. It's kind of going up in a kind of a helical sense. So there is some motion going on another level. Anyway, Scott, yeah, interesting. We'll see what
Um,
happens. It's
oh yeah,
brutal.
I appreciate it. I mean, we pray for the people who, the innocent people, got caught in the middle of this. My opinion, this is 100% man-made. I mean, I know they had winds and
Me
fires.
too.
The fires began in three separate places, and
I
then
don't care. I talked to an electrician
right,
friend of mine today. He's like, "Oh, the transformers in the wind." I'm like, "Dude, no. They're catching people setting fires.
right,
Stop believing the narrative, the wildfires up north when in San Francisco when there was and I go back to what I started with. Notre Dame, it's a destruction of culture. It's a destruction of Western culture to a degree.
right,
And Japan has been insulated and kept their culture, even though
right,
it's been sort of very modernized. They still have a culture. The United States is their culture is Hollywood, right? Their
right.
culture is a Hollywood creation. It's the reality studio.
Yep.
What happens when that burns down and
And
people are
right,
left bereft of any firmament? You know,
yeah.
it's
I
gonna
just
get
find it.
weird.
Know what I found it just an aside, and this is probably for another show too, but the gods of the Shinto gods, there's a theory that the gods, are now anime and manga, right? Like
Right, 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 right,
right?
right.
So, but our gods are actually constructed in Hollywood now, which is
Right.
I find
Sure,
interesting.
sure.
You
No,
know,
I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah, this is,
these are
the
superheroes are our gods, and
right,
Jerry
right. Well,
Seinfeld,
there's that
the
Chris Knowles
Sopranos.
guy who I'm not a huge fan, but he does the Gods Wear
That's right.
Spandex. I never
But
read
anyway,
it, but it's
but it's
but
sort of
yeah, they've supplanted,
right.
and we can go back to the communist idea of destroying common sense. You
Mhm.
know, these religions, all of them, have lasted for quite a while. I
Mhm.
mean, there was this structure that actually held together. And then we have this kind of transhumanist idea that we can do better. But
Mhm.
really, I don't think they want to do better, Scott. I believe they want to destroy it all and for some perverse reason see where it lands. I don't know if it's a degradation thing, but again, I go back to what I said at the beginning. When I saw that it was Planet of the Apes, I was like, sure, that's where they want to go. This is the
Right.
landscape, this kind of dystopian, nightmare. It's a
Everything's symbolic.
madhouse. It's a
Everything,
madhouse.
everything's symbolic. Well, thank you, Steve. This has been interesting. I think we raised a lot of
Always
good
nice talking
questions.
to you, Scott. And
Absolutely.
uh, and thank you. I'll talk to you soon, right?